Welcome to Mishna study, Masechet Terumot Perek Dal Mishnah Yud Aleph. Over here in this Mishnah, we're going to discuss if Teruma fell on top of a pile. So you know the vicinity of where it is, right? Now, are you allowed to use that whole pile to be Mevatel, to be Ma'aleh, the Teruma that fell in? Or do we say, no, I know where it is, I know where it fell onto, and I could only use that area, that vicinity, to be Mevatel, to be Ma'aleh, that Teruma. And that's really going to be the halacha in the end, that we're only allowed to use that spot where it fell into. So if it fell into, on top of a pile, so we could use anything on that top to be ma'aleh, the teruma, but we can't use everything that's underneath in the bottom of the pile. So se'at teruma, shenafla al pi megura, ukfa'a. You have a se'av teruma, one se'av teruma that fell on top of the megura. Megura is a storage house, right? It's where you're storing all your wheat, all your regular produce. And it fell on top of this pile. Ukfa'a. Ukfa'a literally means you skimmed it off, right? The etymology of this word, Rambam actually explains, it comes from the language of kafe'u Terumot, right? Kafe'u is something that gets congealed, right? It comes, right, literally over there. The Malbim actually explains kafe'u Terumot, that's talking in Shat Hayam, across Yam Suf, kafe'u Terumot, it froze, right? The waters actually froze on two sides, like as two walls of ice as they pass through. That's actually the Malbim explains. So it's interesting, but the language of kafu, right? Even modern Hebrew, makpi is a freezer. Kafuli, I'm frozen, right? So that's the language ukfa'a. So it comes from that language of congealed, frozen, and usually the top of something, right, is usually the thing that gets either has that layer that gets congealed or frozen first. So over here we're using it as a verb where we're skimming off that top layer. Right? So you did over here when the se'ah fell off on top, fell into this pile, you skimmed off that top pile. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, right? Rabbi Eliezer says, Im yesh bakipui, right? If there is on top of this top layer, right? Ta'aleh be'ahad u'me'ah, right? It'll be oleh. If this layer has 100, right? To be mevatel, that one teruma that fell in, right, to be ma'aleh, that one piece of teruma that fell in. So it's a ratio of 1 to 101, but we're only allowed to look at that top layer. That would be okay. Rabbi Yoshua Omer lo ta'aleh. Rabbi Yoshua says, no, it doesn't work. Se'at teruma shenafla al pi megura yikapena. Rather what? Rather, you have to go ahead and that one se'av teruma that fell in, you have to, on top of this pile, you have to actually take off that entire layer. Right, so whereas Rabbi Eliezer, is able to look at the ratio on top of that layer. Rabbi Yoshua comes and says, you're not allowed to look at the ratio. You have to go ahead and skim off that entire layer. And imken, if so, lama amru teruma ola b'me'ah ve'ahad. Why do we say that there is a ratio of 1 to 100 when it comes to teruma? What's the point of that? You're saying you have to skim off the entire layer. If I have to take off the entire layer, then what's the point of the ratio? What's the point of ma'aleh in 1 in 100? And this is the answer in the Mishnah is b'she'eno yodea im beluloten o le'ayin naflu. That's specific where you don't know if they got mixed in together or you don't know the vicinity of where it fell in. But according to Rabbi Yoshua, over here, you have to go ahead and say and remove the entire pile. Now you may ask, right? You may ask, and Rambam does point this out. This is the opposite of what we said before. Tahtonot ma'alot ta'ilionot, right? Even according to Rabbi Eliezer, what we spoke about in last Mishnah with the jugs. So Rabbi Eliezer said you need 100 different barrels, and Rabbi Yoshua said it was enough, right, to have the tahtonot, the bottom of each barrel be ma'aleh, right? Sorry, Rabbi Eliezer was the one that said that you're allowed to look at the bottoms of each barrel, and it's ma'aleh, the top of each barrel. And how are you saying over here that Rabbi Eliezer says, no, we have to look at the top as a separate thing? You just said about the case of the figs that you could use the bottom of the figs to the bottom barrel of figs to be ma'aleh, the top that was pressed on, the teruma that was pressed on the top. Why is this case where you have now some teruma figs that fall onto some teruma, let's see, even figs, they fall onto the top of a pile? We're only allowed to look at that top of the pile to look at the ratio to be mevatela, to be ma'aleh at 1 in 100. It's the total opposite of the case of the barrel. And this, Hanabam says, and he points out the Yerushalmi says, Muhlefet shitate de Rabbi Eliezer. Muhlefet hashita. It's the opposite, right? You switch the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, right? And this is how Hanabam explains to make sense of both these Mishnayot together. Halacha is like Rabbi Yoshua, right? Interestingly enough, as we explained, that Rabbi Yoshua says that it's not oleh. If it fell on top of a pile, you know the vicinity of where this teruma fell in. You actually have to skim off that top layer. If you don't know, if it got mixed in or you don't know where it fell into, that's where we could use the leniency of the ratio of 1 to 100.